What's up, guys? So, just leaving the shop here. Um, Part of this new channel is going to be, it's not just hunting, fishing, but pretty much everything outdoors. And that's going to be homesteading, it's going to be uh, survival type things. But today I'm going to actually be teaching you how to make a old school string snare for rabbits. Um, This is where you can just essentially take some jute cord, nylon string, however that you would like, and just using that and what nature provides, maybe besides some scrap apples or something, um, you can actually make string snares and catch supper or breakfast or however you like to eat your rabbits. I actually did this as a kid and as a teenager a lot. This was taught to me by my grandfather. I think that a lot of these they're not really tricks, they were just kind of like way of life. But a lot of these skills are disappearing, they're becoming lost. So I've taught all of this to my kids, again, taught to me by my grandfather. Hopefully, they'll teach it to their kids. But not everyone has grandfathers that taught them this kind of thing. Mine grew up during the Depression. If they didn't catch rabbits with their snares, then they didn't have a meal for the next day. So it was actually survival for them. And since during the Depression, really no one had any money, even shotgun shells to rabbit hunt like we would today, that's was kind of out of the picture. So let me show you how to actually set up a string snare just using a knife and a piece of string. First, we need to find some rabbit trails. This is actually looking like a pretty decent place. We've got a lot of habitat here that would be, great, some thick brush, great for rabbits, and actually starting to see some rabbit trails. So what we're looking for now is a sapling. So basically, a small tree that we can bend over, preferably, around one of these trails, and use that as our spring device for this trap. Okay, you see these little shoots here? That's actually Easter lilies. And, we're in some woods here. So, I know the property, and I know back in the 1800s there used to be an old homestead here. So that's where those Easter lilies came from. Usually, if you're in the middle of the woods somewhere and you see Easter lilies, they were planted there. So here's pretty fresh rabbit tracks, especially leading over into that. So this is going to be a perfect little area here. Now let's just find our sapling. It's actually a deer up there. It's an old one. So I actually found a really good one here and just broke off a couple of limbs here and then the top. So we want it to, whenever it's pulled down like this, just be able to spring back like that whenever it's triggered. So this one will do it. Plus there's a nice little rabbit trail going right here. Now what we're looking for to set up our device, just a stick like this. It needs to be kind of a green, you don't want it to break, so not dry, but kind of in the shape of a Y, like that. And then we will try to break this off. So like this on one side. Now this is the part that will actually be going into the ground, so we want to leave it long, especially if the ground's saturated. It's kind of wet right now. It's a lot wet right now. And then just to make this a little easier to drive in, we'll just sharpen this tip. This is actually a knife from a shed that the boys and I found. It's probably 10 years ago, maybe longer, that we made. We will be doing some shed hunting also. All right, so this is just one part of it. All right, so something like this. A couple other things that we're going to need to just get together is a little piece of branch that will go just like right here. So I like to strip the bark back a little bit, make sure it's not too green. It needs to be kind of rigid. So you need a piece about like this. So once we get that, then you'll need four more. They're probably quarter of an inch around. Four more sticks. I'd say 6 inches long that will actually be setting up the parameter of our string with. And probably the most important of all of these little sticks that we're going to be gathering is we need something to actually hold our bait. So to hold this little piece of apple that I'm going to put on here, and it will also be the trigger. Okay, so again, you'll see all this here in a minute, but it needs to be pretty rigid, maybe 10 inches long. Again, you can alter this once you get your rig set up here. I like to peel the bark off of it. To each their own. It's going to turn brown anyway. But on the side that you want your apple on, you'll sharpen that up. And then the opposite side, you want a flat spot. So you only are going to be removing material from two opposite edges here. So the front and the back. Okay, so there we are. See how it narrows down? I'll put all this together and show you where this flat part comes in. All right, so boys are all at work right now, or they'd be helping me out with this. Hearing something moving. Squirrel, rabbit, probably squirrel. But essentially, these are the parts that we need. Okay, so we have our little apple, a little snack, have our stick that we're going to be putting this on. We actually have our, we'll call it the fork. And we're going to start with this. So you need to kind of determine where you want the end of your string to actually be set up. Whenever I say the end of my string, I mean something like this. Okay, so we're going to be making like a noose kind of like this. So it's going to be set up kind of like in that shape. So we kind of need to see where we want that, and we need to see what our branch is going to allow us. So I'm going to want this here, my string kind of right in this area. So I'm going to put my fork about right here. It's a good place to tie onto this, and it's like a pretty good spot. This will actually go into the ground sideways. So not like this, but like that. So let's go ahead and get this put in. Again, I've been doing this since I was a kid. Me and my cousin would, cold enough days, we would set snares in the morning before school, check them, when we get back from school. Or if it was going to warm up too much that day, we would just set them at night, check them first thing in the morning before school. Now, this part, you want to keep pushing as far as you can get it into the ground because you're going to have the springing action of the sapling here pulling against this all the time. So you can use rock, you can use your knife, whatever, but you want to get it in deep. That way it just won't pull right back out. Okay, so we have our fork already in the ground. It's in there pretty good and tight, but we'll test that here in a minute. We have our bait holder here, our trigger. This is going to be just our rope release. You'll see that here in a minute. And then our four sticks that we'll use to actually frame out the noose at the end. But to test this out, first I'm going to attach it to my sapling. You can tie this on however that you would like, but I like to try to get it right above where my release is going to be. So about right here. So right here is about where I want my little, 1 inch release stick. let's get that tied. And sometimes it's easier to get that tied if you have a little notch going around the center. It just keeps the rope in the center. All right, so with that attached, just to test this, I'm going to run this in between the fork and just slowly let go of it. Okay, so we know that this fork will hold. Okay, so while this is being held in place, I'm just going to kind of measure out kind of where everything's going to be. I'm just going to roughly put these in place just to get an idea. Okay, so this is where our new section will be. It'll be something like this. And we can move this around a little bit, but it's going to give me an idea of how much string that I need. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, but if I didn't have the camera going and all of that, I could throw one of these together pretty quick. I've just always been fascinated by any of these old school hunting, trapping techniques. The fact that people, relied on this to survive, the added benefit of it's a skill to know in case you ever have to survive on what you have. So, just like that. And that's all that I did was, in case you missed it here, I just tied a loop onto the end of my rope and then ran my string through that loop, and that creates this kind of a slip knot or noose type of effect. That's roughly how it's going to be. It's going to be a little closer to the ground. I like to dig out a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way. That way, in case it accidentally triggers, don't get my finger caught up in it. Wouldn't that be something? Work with saws every day and lose a finger in a string snare. And the reason why I like to dig a little bit of a hole is so I can set my bait down inside of it. That way they actually have to run their head through it to get to it. So next, we'll cut us off a piece of apple, bait, whatever you want to use. Stick it right on the end of this. Boys would be out here, which I call them boys, but they're men. They're running the channel as well. They're all at work right now. I got to sneak out of the shop just a little early. What I'm doing here, I'm running my trigger across the fork, and then what's tied to my string, I want it to barely like stick into the corner of our fork and also on the bottom of the trigger. I'll slowly let up and see if it holds. But this is what you want it to look like. So as you can see, the bait stick is the only thing that's holding the stick that's on the string in place. So as soon as that lets loose, the rabbit comes along, starts chewing on it, vibrating that down. As they push down on it, that will release. This whole contraption goes off, and you've got a rabbit. And you see how my bait is kind of below the surface of the ground. Again, that's just my preference. You could just put it, any way that you would like it, build up around it. And ideally, you would have your string stretched out before you did all this. Just didn't want it to get in the way of the video. Just always keep your hands away or put your arm back over this. That way, in case it goes off, you can get your hands out of the way. Right, so it looks something like that. And then you can take any extra branches or leaves and kind of build up around the string. Just don't let it get like in the way of the string. But this would just keep anything from, sticking its head underneath. You would spread some leaves back around here, cover this up, make it look natural. Okay, so make sure my head's out of the way. So the rabbit comes around from either side. and starts nibbling on the apple. This is what happens. We would typically run, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5, every day. Um, and we always, would have a rabbit or two. But yeah, super cool rabbit trap if you're ever in a bind, needing some food, or if you just like rabbit. You can do this. It doesn't cost anything really. You can find some cordage lying around about anywhere. Really, your bait is about it. And I've used everything. Apples seem to work the best. So just find that old apple that's, starting to get bad and use that as your snare bait. But the cool thing is once you have these set up, you can reuse them over and over and over. I typically just change out my string every season, but other than that, it's ready to be reset and catch another rabbit. I hope you like this kind of stuff. It'll be intermingled with the other footage, fishing, hunting, you name it, but this is an everything channel. If it has to do with the outdoors, we do it. We're going to teach you. See ya.